Friends, a very warm, perhaps warm should not be said, a rather cool welcome, hopefully cool, to you this evening in the 7th session of our series, Gandhi Matters, which Raza Foundation organizes in collaboration with the India International Center. This is the 150th year of Gandhi, and it occurred to us that we should have a fresh look by many viewpoints at this phenomena called Gandhi. In fact, by looking at what is happening, it appears that Gandhi has been systematically made irrelevant, and therefore it's an act of moral imagination to bring him back to our attention, to what he did, what he thought, what he felt, how he reacted in circumstances which seem to have multiplied in terms of violence, in terms of hatred, in terms of bloodbath, in terms of whatever you have. So, this is the 7th session, and we were to conclude by October, but I think looking at the continuing relevance of Gandhi, we'll carry on for a while until we feel exhausted, or you feel exhausted. We have had 6 sessions already, and this is the 7th. And we are trying to get people from different disciplines. For instance, the next one is on the 17th of May. Will be by Shiva Vishwanathan. After that, Pandit Kumar Gandhi, the great musician, has created a rag called Gandhi Malhar. So we have requested the daughter to come and present that rag, and on that occasion we will discuss the relationship Gandhi had with music. Let us not forget that Shubhalakshmi became a national celebrity because Gandhi used to like her to come and sing bhajans to him. Then there are 3 painters, Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, Atul Tolia and Riaz Komu, who have used images of Gandhi in their works. So we have invited them to come and talk. We have with my friend, and I'm coming to him later, RAMIM JAHANBEGLOO, we have planned a kind of a panel discussion about Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, Gandhi and Martin Luther King, Gandhi and Dalai Lama. So that will be one part. And we hope to bring theatre men who have done plays on Gandhi and continue the series as long as we have people who can talk meaningfully and illuminatingly about Gandhi in the new circumstances. RAMIM JAHANBEGLOO is an old friend, and he is a philosopher from Iran, who is now has been in exile for quite a while, partly in India and partly in Canada. His interest in Gandhi, also in Nehru and that period, is quite deep, and he wrote a wonderful book called The Disobedient Indian, which is on Gandhi's idea of disobedience, and put it in a context of political scientific thinking. I happened to be the person he approached to write the introduction. Not that I was competent to do it, but I did it because of friendly pressure. So he is going to talk to you about a subject He teaches in O.P. Jindal University, and he is the only one who seemed to be as active as I am. I in my 80th year, and he in his whatever year. And he keeps on organizing things. And for instance, now he's going to organize a debate or a conference on Albert Camus. He had done one on Heidegger. He had done one on
Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir.
Simone de Beauvoir, etc. So he enriches our intellectual life here in a big way, and we should be grateful to him for doing that. He is going to talk about Gandhi and Islam. As you know, there have been, Gandhi famously said, I am a Hindu, I am a Muslim, I am a Christian, I am a Jain, and I am a Buddhist, and I am a Parsi. I am all these things because I am a good Hindu. So this is an area which has been much misunderstood, misinterpreted, and all kinds of, we are living in times of great amnesia. This is organized amnesia. If there is an organized violence, organized hatred, there is also organized amnesia. And one of the objectives of this series, please come, there are seats here. Organized amnesia. So one of the objectives of this series is to remind those of us who still care for memory and history. Both are under severe attack from many quarters. To remind you that what was the fact, what was the reality, what was the truth, what happened. So I think RAMIM JAHANBEGLOO will surely enlighten us about the relationship Gandhi had with Islam. Floor is yours.
Thank you. The rule of the game is that you can speak up to 45 minutes.
Okay.
This is what most academics do. And then it will be open question answer.
I try to play with the rules. Though I really don't do that in life, actually.
And please put off this damn thing.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honored by this invitation from my friend Ashok Vajpayee and the Raza Foundation. I'm also deeply honored by your presence, the presence of my colleagues like Shankar and Sachin Dhawan from Jindal University here, my friends Neeraj Chandok and Dipankar Gupta here present, Apurvanand also. So thank you so much for being here and of course the other members of the audience. Let me start my talk with a quote from a Gandhian, Martin Luther King Jr., who said, the ultimate measure of man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. A beautiful quote from a beautiful man and a fighter of nonviolence. Now, this quote of MLK is not only an invitation to moral courage that both Gandhi and him had, but also an appeal to a kind of Socratic self-examination in a period of history that we need more than ever, a non-violent critique of violence in our world. And as we can see with the events that we had very recently in Sri Lanka, this critique is more urgent than ever in relation with the way dogmas are perceived and the way fanatics perceive themselves in relation to their traditions. Of course, being in India, I'm not just talking about the fanatic Muslims, I'm also talking about the fanatic Hindus, or as Dalai Lama says, also fanatic Buddhists. But this question to ask is, what reading of the religious texts and traditional traditions do we need to have? And the point I support this evening is that with Gandhi, we always had, for those of you who have been working on Gandhi, who read him, we had a pluralist, multidimensional, and empathetic, and what I call a soft reading of religious texts and traditions, including Islam. And that's why reading Gandhi in relation to Islam and to problematize Gandhian non-violence, I would say, in the Muslim context, these are two different things. Reading Gandhi in relation to Islam and trying to do what I've been doing in the past 10 years also, among my other things, to contextualize Gandhi in the Muslim context, meaning if you bring the reading of Gandhi, your reading of Gandhi into countries like Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other places, Morocco, Algeria, these help us to understand the originality, I would say, of a non-violent tradition of Islam, including in the Indian subcontinent. So the end results of such a process are certainly unpredictable, but given the Gandhian view that truth emerges in a dialogical encounter among subjects, the making of a new Muslim Gandhi in the 21st century, I would say, remains certainly a challenge, but also an open perspective. Now, let's go back a little bit to history, and I start from there, which is the first part of my speech, and it's about how Gandhi encountered Islam. Most of you know about that, and that's interesting when we read his autobiography, but also when we read the collective works. Now, Gandhi's encounters with Islam, of course, started at a very early age of his life. As all of you know, Gandhi's family had a great experience in dealing with Muslims as part of the local community in Porbandar. Muslims were frequent visitors to Gandhi's family's home, and one of the closest friends of Gandhi, who lived very close to Mohandas, and he talks about in the first pages of his autobiography, was of course Sheikh Mehtab. Now Mehtab is quite a character. For those of you who have read the autobiography, he was the son of a jailer employed by the British, who had a very complex relationship with Gandhi. Gandhi describes him, I quote him, as a young, hardy and athletic boy who kept him under his thumb for more than years, and invited him to do things that Gandhi actually didn't want to do, like eating meat, to become strong and get rid of the British, actually. So Gandhi was all the time, according to what he says in his autobiography, was warned by his mother and his eldest brother about Mehtab's evil influence on him. But why do I quote this? Because from the very beginning I said that Gandhi had a pluralist, a multi-dimensional attitude towards different traditions like Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, but also Islam. And we can see that from the very beginning, he actually tries to say, no, I can reform Mehtab. Of course, he didn't. He never reformed Mehtab. But Gandhi was an optimist, and from the very beginning he said, I'm going to reform Mehtab. And of course, this is the attitude that he had in regard to other Muslims later in South Africa and also in India. Because as history shows us, in the long life fight against the British domination, Gandhi always considered Muslims as friends and as allies. And this is the point that we have to make when we work on Gandhi, when we read Gandhi. The next significant phase of Gandhi's encounter with Islam and Muslims are during his years in South Africa, of course, where he started to work in 1893 as a lawyer for a Muslim merchant from Porbandar, Abdullah Shet, who built a business in Durban. Durban, and during his long stay in South Africa and his first political experiences, Gandhi was able to establish close ties with Indian Muslims in South Africa. Now, what does he say? Again, a very important thing for a historian or somebody who was working on Gandhian scholarship. He felt very familiar with the cultural identity of the Indian Muslims and shared a common life with them. Even Gandhi mentions that he lived with the Muslims in South Africa and he was able to learn, I underline learning, learn their habits, thoughts, and aspirations. And he even says that he was so close to the Muslims, Indian Muslims in South Africa, that he was kind of a member of their families, and because of this proximity, Muslim wives and Muslim sisters did not observe the purdah, the veil, in front of him. That's very strange, coming from Muslim women. That means that Gandhi was really close, at least to these families, Muslim families that he's talking about. And by the way, if we study the collective works of Mahatma Gandhi, we will see that at many occasions, Gandhi talks about his relationship with Muslims throughout his life as a constructive action, a very positive action. For example, I've gone through the 100 volumes, and for example, I give you the exact dates, and you can go and check. In a prayer meeting in Delhi on September 7, 1946, Gandhi talks about his friendship with the Muslims, and he says, I quote him, "I had a number of Muslim friends when I was at school. I went to South Africa to plead the case of some Muslim friends of my brother. I had gone as an employee of a Muslim firm, and I served the Hindus through them. I served the Hindus through them, Muslims. My memory of those days is a happy one." Okay? You cannot be more transparent than that. And actually, when reading Gandhi, we can understand that from the very beginning of his Satyagraha campaign in South Africa, what is on his mind is the joint commitment of Hindus and Muslims to justice and to interfaith harmony and solidarity. But Gandhi's appeal to interfaith dialogue and solidarity among Indians in South Africa is accompanied from the very beginning with something else, which again is very important to me, to some of you, but if you have read Gandhi very acutely, I think that you have realized that that's very important in Gandhi's life and works. And that's a critique of organized religion by Gandhi, including that of fanatics and mullahs in Islam. He's a critique of the mullahs, theologians in Islam, in the same way that he's a critique of the Hindutva, for example. For this matter, Gandhi, I'm actually very much into history of ideas and intellectual history. So I actually did a book in French which was on the intellectual foundations of Gandhi's nonviolence, meaning what kind of readings Gandhi did to get to his philosophy of nonviolence. Of course, I studied Tolstoy, Henry David Thoreau, Ruskin, and many others. And here, Gandhi, at least in South Africa, not in the period of after 1915 when he's in India, but in South Africa, as you know, he has correspondence with Tolstoy and he's a reader of Tolstoy. And in this context that I'm talking about, he again goes back to Tolstoy. And he says, Tolstoy pointed out that selfish priests, Brahmins, and mullahs had distorted the teachings of Christianity and other religions and misled the people. There is no room in religion for anything other than compassion. Therefore, if people went to follow the path of religion, they must do nothing but good. Unquote. This is Gandhi speaking in South Africa. already somebody who's resisting organized religion, resisting fanaticism, dogmatism in religion, knowing how to separate between the two, and with this he is approaching Islam and the Muslims. So for Gandhi, religious dogmas do not help to promote a creative dialogue. They do not help to promote interculturality. They do not help to promote interfaith dialogue. And he makes no exception for Islam. In the same way that he talks about Hinduism and Christianity, in the same way he talks about Islam. Gandhi never approached mullahs to learn Islam, and I'm going to get to that. If he learned about Islam, from whom he learned that? As you know, when he was in England and when he was in South Africa, he was approached by some Christian, I'm not talking about Andrews and others, but by some Christians, and they wanted him to become Christian. And he said, why should I become a Christian? I know more than you about Jesus Christ, and I apply Sermon on the Mount. I don't need to become a Christian. Now the same attitude of Gandhi about Islam. He didn't need to become Muslim. He could study Islam, actually. So I think that he made no exception of Islam because he did not hesitate to say, and this is again very much Gandhi, even the teachings of the Quran cannot be exempt from criticism. This is Gandhi speaking. Because after all, we have no other guide but our reason to tell us what may be regarded as revealed and what may not be. Reading this, if I didn't tell you that it was Gandhi, would say this is Voltaire or a French Enlightenment, a philosopher of the Enlightenment. So as Gandhi says in volume 50 of his collected works, the moral duty is to resist the untruth of religions. So it's a moral duty, it's not only an intellectual duty, it's a moral duty. So in order to take us to the heart of his reasoning on interreligious dialogue, Gandhi declared that his effort should never be to undermine another faith, but to make the other person a better follower of his or her faith. Now, the problematic of Hindu-Muslim unity, which has always been there, and interfaith dialogue that I talked about in the Gandhian political philosophy, brings me to the heart of our discussion on Gandhi and Islam. First of all, Gandhi makes, as I said, and this is very important, and it's very rare to see some historians of Gandhism talk about that, he makes the distinction between the holy book of the Muslims, the Quran, and Muslim interpreters of the Quran. He makes this distinction. And there's a lot to say, so I think that you're going to come back to me with your questions on this. He writes, now again, let me go back to the archives to make it really solid of what I'm saying. Young India, March 5th, 1925. Quote Gandhi, I claim to understand enough of the Quran and the history of Islam to know that a multitude of interpreters have interpreted the Quran to suit their preconceived notions. Today, I think we can use Gandhi against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the suicide bombers of Colombo, and many others. We can, as he's doing it a century ago, actually. And in a letter, again, on May 22nd, 1927, to Devonshire, he adds, it is unsafe and even dangerous to judge Islam and Muslims by the conduct of many of those who have misinterpreted here in India, and then to seek to ascribe their conduct to the teachings of the Quran. Again, he separates between the Quran and the interpreters of the Quran. And all this, however, does not mean that Gandhi considers the Quran, I come back to that, as a book beyond all criticism, as I said. Actually, in his article in Young India that I quoted, Gandhi is quite clear about this because he says, surely Islam has nothing to fear from criticism. Surely Islam has nothing to fear from criticism, even if it be unreasonable. But I would like to say that every true scripture only gains by criticism. Again, when you read this, you would say this has been written by a philosopher of 19th century, 18th century, I would say. And very, very strong actually. So, Gandhi's reading of Islam is not only that of a critical rationalist, but he's also trying to find roots of non-violence and peace in Islam. Why is so? Because Gandhi never considered Islam as a religion of violence. When we read him, we go through the collected works, the 100 volumes, he never talks about Islam as a religion of violence. Actually, he's quite clear on that in different letters and speeches. For example, in a letter May 22nd, 1927, again to Deveshwar, he affirms, I adhere to the conclusion that Islam is not a religion of the sword, but it is, like all other great religions, a religion of peace. Okay? And then, again in his speech, January 4th, 1916, he says, the sacred book of Islam stresses the importance of compassion. So Islam for Gandhi is a religion of compassion. Why is it so? And I come to that immediately. Is because Gandhi interprets Islam as a religion of fakirs in the same way he does it for Hinduism. Actually, he says Hinduism is a religion of the sages. Islam has survived on the strength of fakirs. This is his own words. If you want to know where he says it, go to volume 25 of his collected works. And as a matter of fact, in a speech that he gives in a meeting in Pune in 1934, and this meeting is about actually the Prophet Muhammad, he says that the Prophet Muhammad is a fakir. Because he says the Prophet had renounced everything. He could have commanded wealth if he had so desired, but he didn't do that. So actually he talks about Prophet Muhammad as a seeker of truth who suffered endless persecution and was brave and feared no man but God alone. So the interpretation is actually, if he has an interpretation of Islam, is to go back to the roots of Islam, not necessarily to the different periods of Islamic history or Islamic conquest, like the Abbasids, Umayyads, but to the Prophet himself. What's interesting for me is the comparison with Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, because Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, for those of you who have read him, he does exactly the same thing. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and I'm going to talk about him later, he says, I never learned non-violence from Gandhiji, I learned it from the Prophet of Islam. And the Prophet of Islam is a prophet of non-violence. So, very much similar, and of course, my thesis here is that Gandhi, instead of learning about Islam and being invited to read the Quran from, let's say, hard readers of the Quran, and I would say from the dogmatics and fanatics, he learned it from soft readers of Islam, which the two main are Maulana Azad and Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the people who were very close to him and taught him how to read the Quran and how to approach Islam, actually. So it's very important to understand that, which brings me to the second part of my talk, and what is more precisely the relationship between Gandhi and the Khilafat. Why is the relationship of Gandhi with Muslims and the Khilafat so important? Because Gandhi's non-cooperation, Gandhi's Satyagraha in India, had gained on three levels. And one is, of course, his campaigns, with the exception of his campaigns in South Africa. One is his engagement with the peasant communities in India. And one is the inclusion of the Khilafat, of course, which is very, very important. And so this is why I talk about the Khilafat, which is one of the levels and layers important for Gandhian Satyagraha in India after 1915. Now, Gandhi himself, he says that Khilafat is a sacred treasure with our Muslim countrymen, a sacred treasure, which meaning he gave a lot of importance to the Khilafat. Now, why is it so important? Of course, you know, because he thought that the only way to win non-cooperation movement is to involve Muslims in the struggle for self-rule, for Swaraj, and his willingness to go out of his way to win over Muslims actually won him friends and admirers among the Muslims, but also enemies among the Hindus. And a lot of friends of him from the Hindu community actually asked questions why he's getting so close with the Muslims. So he joined very consciously the Khilafat movement, which actually was important for him because this rapprochement was somehow helping Gandhi to become a leader or national leader. And I would say without the help of the Muslims, the Indian Muslims, he would not have been a national leader. I defend this thesis again very strongly. And it's important because, as you know, the Khilafat, which starts about Muslim leadership in regard to the British and to the First World War and what's happening with the decline of the ending of the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Caliphate and the ending of the Turkish Caliphate, the whole issue for the Muslims is not the issue of fighting the British as it is for Gandhi, but it is actually a holy issue. It's the issue of Islam itself and the ending of the Ottoman Empire as the center for Islamic sovereignty. So what happens is that the Indian Muslims, before Gandhi joins them, they want to turn the Turkish question into an Indian question. And Gandhi actually, and we have a speech which is delivered on March 21st, 1920 by Maulana Muhammad Ali, who is one of the Indian Muslim leaders, and he says, when he goes to Paris, in this meeting, he says, we have not come to save any territories, meaning Turkish territories. We have come to you to help us in preserving the sanctity of our soul. The sanctity of our soul, meaning the caliphate. Something that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk actually destroyed completely by declaring the Turkish Republic, of course, as you know. So this is the context of All India Khilafat movement and conference when Gandhi joins them in 1919. And the relation between Gandhi and the Khilafat is very important for understanding and analyzing Gandhi's take on Islam in general, I would say. And in this perspective, it is true that Muslim leaders like Maulana Abdul Bari, Maulana Azad, and Ali brothers had already initiated the Khilafat movement when they were joined by Gandhi. But I think there is no shadow of doubt that Gandhi's arrival gave a new strength to the Khilafat. Again, that's the point. There might be some disagreements among the historians, but I think that was the case, even if the Khilafat didn't continue and it ended. But let's see a little bit more how Gandhi actually approached them, and I think this is very interesting for our debate, because I think that here we understand also Gandhi's relationship to Jinnah later on. For example, when you have later on during the Quit India movement, you have all the tensions between Jinnah and Gandhi. Gandhi answers to Jinnah by getting back to the Khilafat time. And Jinnah, he says that Gandhi is an enemy of the Muslims. Okay? And Gandhi replies, I quote him again, whether I'm an enemy of Muslims or their friend, Maulana Abdul Bari would have answered had he been alive. He was a great man. I used to stay with him in Lucknow. Okay? So the reference to Abdul Bari in order to answer Jinnah, he uses one Muslim against another Muslim, saying, okay, what you're saying, you say I'm an enemy of Islam, but I'm telling you that when I was with the Khilafat movement, actually I was very close to these people. So evidently Gandhi's sympathy for the Khilafatists was more than a simple fellowship, since he was trying to in the same way, like in South Africa that I said that they didn't actually observe the purdah, the wives and the sisters. He was very close to those families, so he adopted the same thing. And when he joined the Khilafat, he invited the leaders to join Satyagraha and adopt non-violence. And he wanted to gain Muslim support, but he also wanted to guarantee the matter of cow protection in the Indian Muslim community. This is why when you go and read Gandhi and you read the letters with the Khilafatis, he treated Khilafat as Kamaduk, the mythical cow that gave whatever one asked for. And he explains this later in Young India when he writes, I have been telling Maulana Shaukat Ali all along that I was helping him to save his cow, i.e. the Khilafat, his cow, Khilafat is the cow, because I hope to save my cow. Okay? Look at the language he's using, symbolism, the symbolic language, which is very political at the same time, both religious and political. And as a gesture toward Gandhi, Muhammad Ali stopped eating beef and celebrated Eid without beef, actually, during the time that they were campaigning together. So in the beginning, all the Muslim leaders, including Muhammad Ali, Shaukat Ali, Hakim Ajmal Khan, and Abdul Bari of Ferengi Mahal, they all listened to Gandhi for the first years. And this is what we understand by even reading Maulana Azad. Actually, I ask you to go and read, for those of you who are writing books on Gandhi, go back and read Maulana Azad's India Wins Freedom. Many of you have read it. When he's describing what happens when Gandhi joined them, he describes it very clearly. And what he says is that if people really wanted to help Turkey, there was no alternative to the program sketched by Gandhiji. No alternative. Meaning that we only had to choose the program that Gandhiji suggested us. And the two people from the Khilafat who stayed with Gandhi until the end of his life were Maulana Azad and Abdul Ghaffar Khan, actually. So, but despite that, of course, we have a dose of pan-Islamism among the Indian Muslim community. We have the exercise of violence. And I think that we have to have a deeper analysis of why Khilafat didn't work out and why they separated. But I think this period is most important in the relationship between Gandhi and Islam. Now, already in 1921, we had cracks which had appeared in the unity between Gandhi and the Khilafatists. And by 1926, the outbreak of communal riots in India made the situation for Gandhi and Khilafatists even worse. And many Muslim leaders like Shaukat Ali and Jinnah refused to accept nonviolence as a moral absolute. But in the non-violent camp of Khilafatists, people like, as I said, Maulana Azad and Abdul Ghaffar Khan came to believe that Indian Muslims should go on with Gandhi's non-cooperation campaign, even if the Khilafat movement doesn't continue. But as time passed, the shadow of Gandhi on the Khilafat movement grew thinner and thinner, while Jinnah's domination over the Muslim community became more effective. And this is actually one of the important and interesting things that I found in the archives, is that with the rise of Mustafa Kemal in Turkey and the end of the Khilafat, the Ali brothers decided to champion Wahhabism, Ibn Saud's Wahhabism. So they turned towards Saudi Arabia and to Wahhabis. And we have to understand that some historians of Muslim India consider Gandhi as being responsible for this, for jettisoning actually the rise of a secular and modernist leadership among the Muslims of India. This is what they say. But I think what was on Gandhi's mind in regard to Islam and Muslims in India was first and foremost the Hindu-Muslim unity again, as from the very, very beginning, as in South Africa, because we have all his letters from South Africa, he's still talking about that. Actually, I quoted one of these letters in one of my articles very recently in the Hindu, when he's talking about dying and self-sacrifice. And this is the line of thought that we find in both Maulana Azad and Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Cooperation with Hindus, I think, was part of Azad's and Ghaffar Khan's practical philosophies. But they also shared with Gandhi this vision of secular India and a tolerant view of Islam, which, as I said in the beginning, actually Gandhi learned a lot from these two, because they were the good, let's not say good Muslims, but they were the true Muslims for him, who had this non-violent, or let's say peaceful or soft readers of Islam. And I think that the vocabulary I'm using some of you might not like it, but I think it's an important vocabulary. I use the word soft reading, and I insist on using it. Because I think that in this case, which is the relationship between Gandhi and Islam, you have the idea of how to read the text and how to approach the text when you're approaching elements of another religion or people of another religion. How you want to read the holy text, and how the terrorists actually, and those who are jihadists in Islam or in other religions like let's say the Buddhists in Myanmar, how they read their texts, which are not supposed to, the elements of violence might not be there, but it's that your reading of the text which makes it so complicated. So the important thing is that Gandhi, Azad, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, in their speeches, in their actions, they always are insisting on the moral imperative of this Hindu-Muslim unity, all the time. And this is what I think is very, very important, because this is why when even Gandhi is writing to Jinnah in 1937, he refers to Maulana Azad as his new guide and advisor on Muslim affairs. He's referring to Maulana Azad. And as for Azad, he believed that Mahatma Gandhi had a mission in life not only for India, but also for the Muslim world. Now, of course, to go very quickly and try to finish, Bacha Khan also, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, with his Khudai Khidmatkars, he represented the non-violent Islam all the time for Gandhi. Every time that he visits Abdul Ghaffar Khan, he's writing about Abdul Ghaffar Khan, he talks about how this element of non-violence is there among these Khudai Khidmatkars, and why is it so important. And I refer you to this you can find also in some of the books which have been written by Indian historians on Gandhi. I refer you to July 1947, the last period of Gandhi's life, and when the frontier province was declared to be part of Pakistan. So actually Abdul Ghaffar Khan had to go to Pakistan. And what Gandhi told him, which is very famous also for those of you who have read the books, he turns to him and he says, your duty is to make Pakistan Pak, pure. Your duty is to go to Pakistan, but try to make Pakistan Pak, actually. We know that what happened to him, actually. He spent much of his time in prison, of course. So, this is actually also very, very important. Now, in this relation, to get to my conclusion, I think that it's important to get back to the discussion that I had from the very beginning. And this is how Gandhi was approaching this religion called Islam, and he generally, how was he reading the Quran in the same way that he was reading the Gita or Ramayana. And I think this is the case. Actually, he didn't separate between these texts, the religious texts, and that's why he said that in his ashram, Sabarmati ashram, Avesta, Quran, Sermon on the Mount, Gita, they all had to be read in the same way. Okay. Now, what is important is also Gandhi's approach to life of the Prophet, as I said, which is important. Now, for this, of course, Gandhi has read also some Westerners, like Washington Irving's Life of Muhammad, or he read, he was introduced to Prophet of Islam through Carlyle's Heroes and Hero Worship. And his admiration for the Prophet Muhammad is important because he's also very much inspired by Tarjuman al-Quran of Maulana Azad. While Azad is initiating Gandhi to a Sufi understanding of Islam. Because as you know, Azad is somebody who's talking about Sarmat, he talks about mysticism, he differentiates between what he calls Deen and Sharia, very important for our debates in Muslim world today in regard with the jihadists and everything. One is Deen, one is Sharia. So all this actually, I think that adds to the pragmatic virtues of non-violent Islam, which Gandhi is learning through them. And again, a very tolerant way of looking at things. So this adds up when Gandhi says, in my opinion, non-violence has had a predominant place in the Quran, and the 1300 years of imperialistic expansion made the Muslims fighters. So Gandhi understood quite well that Islam, like Hinduism, could be used both for violent and non-violent purposes. And that's why he says that I've lived with and among Muslims not for one day but closely and almost uninterruptedly for 20 years, and not one Muslim taught me that Islam was an anti-Hindu religion. Not one Muslim taught me that Islam was an anti-Hindu religion. So here the idea is to emphasize more and more how Islam is ready for this unity with Hinduism, and how Muslims, Indian Muslims, are necessary for this self-transformation of India. Now, last but not least, I think if this is the case, so we can have to go back to finish my talk by saying that I find it so relevant and I find it so original, as I said in the beginning of my talk, that the Gandhian reading of Islam, it destroys the comfortable certitude of Muslim fanatics, but also the Islamophobics, that Islam, on the one hand, is the last and the only religion for the Muslim fanatics, and for the others, Quran is let's say, a book of evil where you can only find violence in it. I think that Gandhi helps us to understand that we have to actually have a more comprehensive understanding of the relationship between man and God, If to understand this relationship, we do not need to go through a dehumanization or a minimization of the civilizational role of Islam and Muslims in the process of maturation of humanity. Thank you very much. Yes.
You would like to sit down? Or?
No, I stand up.
Okay.
I can't
Now is the
stand up.
time for you to make brief comments and ask questions. Yes. Just a minute.
Thank you. Amazing interpretation. And I like the distinction you make between hard reading and soft reading. And the fact that there is no such thing as a text unless you have an interpreter who actually either hard reading it or soft reading it. So since you're an educationist, will you tell us how are they doing it now in the universities? Do you think the education system today, either here or in Pakistan or in the Islamic countries or anywhere else, are they hard reading or soft reading? What would you recommend?
You shouldn't have asked me that question.
I definitely did.
Yes, because I'm very critical about what's going on and the level of postgraduate education or even elementary education, not only in India and Pakistan but all around the world. And I'm very, very critical actually and unhappy about how we teach the younger generations. Now, you have elements, you have people here who have been either teaching in the past, Dipankar at JNU, Neeraj Chandok, Delhi University, Shankar, Sachin are younger professors at General University. I'm a vice dean, and unfortunately, I'm a vice dean at General University. You know, there is, maybe at the time when Dipankar was still teaching, maybe 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, maybe he would at JNU, which is a very special university, maybe he could have, in the same way that he had his contacts with his professors, he could establish it the same way with his students. It's not the case with me. It's not the case with me, especially in India, I can say. Maybe it would have been different in France, but I think that there is a fiasco of education and there is no transmission of values. I would say the most important thing in education is critical mindedness and transmission of values, human values. And this, we are unable to do it. We know it and we continue teaching because of money, because we need the salary. But we are not dedicated and devout in our teachings. And most of us are flatterers of vice chancellors and registrars, if I don't say ass kissers. To be very polite, I would say flatterers. And this is what destroys the country in the long run, you know? It destroys it.
And the youngest students,
because later on these people in the academia become ministers and they become foolish ministers. And they don't serve the citizens either, because they have not served already the younger generation. So it's all about money and power.
no, so the students tend to sense this fakeism, and then the problem starts.
No, it also helps the teachers to get away.
Not necessarily, not necessarily.
Okay.
I think that is the human value which is important, and what I've learned in my life, living in different countries, traveling to 40, living in 7 countries, teaching in at least 5 different cultures. Human relationship is very important, you know. I can tell you, there's one sitting over here, he's in the first year of law at Jindal. Okay, he comes from Aurangabad, and I saw him before he joined Jindal. Now, he has learned more until now from his grandfather than he's learning from us at Jindal. Because the values, the correct values were given to him through his family and his environment. I'm not sure that we can sustain that, and if Jindal University is going to sustain that, because that's not the objectives of a corporate mindset. That's the problem I have with corporate mindsets. Corporates should let people live, and do their education. I mean, give the money and go. You know, if you don't need to prescribe also how to people to teach, if you don't know how to teach. Now that's the problem in all these private universities, that we have the corporates who want to come and say, look at how wonderful I am, without being wonderful people. And if you say, oh, I'm going to fire you, either you flatter me or I fire you. Okay. So this again, disobedient Indian. I love to see some disobedient Indians there, you know. Sorry to be long.
Yes. Thank you. Your professor, sometime Gandhi explained he wanted to live 120 years old.
Who?
Gandhi wanted to live
Gandhi.
120 years, but he was cut short. If you would have survived such long time, what influence you could have influenced the Muslim people, because they were very backward, they were not well involved in education and other activities, they were in slum, and they were having multiple wives and children. To what extent you could have influenced?
First of all, I don't think that Muslim people are necessarily backward. You know, that again is a prejudice you might have. And Gandhi tries to. The first thing that I was talking about is Gandhi is destroying this prejudice and these elements of racism and dogmatism which you find among the Hindus and other communities in India and elsewhere in South Africa, is that when you want to judge people, you go and try to learn about their cultures, but also you go and live with them. Okay, so you cannot go at the end of that room or even go outside that room and you shout from there, I don't like the Muslim who's sitting on that chair that I don't see and I don't know what his name and I don't know what he practices. You know, what I like about Gandhi, I think that if Gandhis are produced every 1,000 years, to tell you the truth. We cannot have it. You cannot produce industrially Gandhis. You know, that's the good thing about people like Gandhis. You cannot produce them in test tubes. You cannot produce them industrially. You cannot produce them in laboratories. Even in the future, you cannot do that. Because Gandhi is not somebody who comes from that family and is born in Porbandar and goes to South Africa. You can have all this itinerary for someone else, but again, he will not make a Gandhi. You know, everything which is so interesting in Gandhi is what he writes about: experimentation, experimenting life, learning from other people. What does it mean to have experience? It's actually a very modern notion, experience. We have it in modern science, we have it in modern philosophy, we have it in Hegel, we have it in Marx, we have it in Kant. Experimentation, okay? Different forms of experimentation. So Gandhi is somebody who's experiencing life, okay? And I think that in order not to be backward is to experiment life. I mean, it's not just sitting in a dogma and being, or sitting in the White House like Donald Trump and thinking that you have millions or trillions and you don't experiment life and you don't experiment other cultures. In 50 years, you're a white page of history. You know, Donald Trump is a white page of history. Thomas Jefferson is not. I'm only in the American context, okay? But I think, yes.
But recently, Culture Committee has proved that there are so many backward Muslims because of
As there are backward Hindus.
May I know? Sir, the one that I compliment you, try to understand Gandhi. But there are certain things which I would like to bring forth. One is that Gandhi was a very simple man. And all his philosophy, politics used to come out of three basic principles of truth, non-violence and celibacy. Now, what he was trying to do, he was also a very shrewd politician. Because when he was talking of religion, he was trying to carry the masses along. And when he was soft interpreting Islam, I think he did a lot of mistakes. And he had to pay with his life for this wrong interpretation. So I feel that soft reading of Islam didn't work out for him. Because if you read Sudhir Ghosh's book when he went to Noakhali and was there trying to quell the riots, how much pained he was To me it seems to be that perhaps there was some mistake which he committed, that's why all his followers departed from it. So that is one observation. The other comment I wanted an answer from you about what was his comments on jihad. I tried to find it out, the comments on this digital version of the 100 volumes which you are referring, but I couldn't come across any mention of jihad, because that's where Gandhi failed. He could not contain some of those hard things of the Holy Quran. Thank you.
Thank you. First point. Simple men can have complexities and can have a complex interpretation of life. And that's the case of Gandhi. Even if he's a simple man, he is a very complex person. Philosophically, culturally, politically, he's a complex person. So that's very, very important, I think. Secondly, I think that Gandhi always had this critical attitude towards all religions, including his own religion, but also Islam. I didn't talk about the story of which you can find also in the collected works, and that's about stoning, the act of stoning in Islam. And in the Afghan context, Gandhi comes up with the story. They tell him what he thinks about the stoning of a woman. And he says, I'm against. And the theologians, the mullahs, they said, but it is written in the Quran, which is not written in the Quran, of course, because it's a cultural thing, actually. And Gandhi says, I don't care. Even if it's written in the Quran, I don't care. This is a wrong attitude. It should not be practiced, So it's important to, once again, to capture this complexity. This complexity, the complexities of personalities, individuals, and life in general, we cannot do it through simple-minded approaches to either texts, cultures, religions, or human beings.
Yeah, very good.
You know?
About this jihad, could you?
I didn't see he writing anything about jihad. Mentioning the word jihad. He talks about, of course, I said he thinks that Islam is not a religion of sword. So when he's talking about the wars, it's not a religion of sword, it's a religion of peace. Yes?
It's a common belief, and from history we know that Jinnah in those days was a liberal Muslim. He fell out of Gandhi. There was difference on Gandhi joining the Khilafat movement. He was against Gandhi joining the Khilafat movement. The next question is, could you give the reference from the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, where Gandhi said, as you are quoting you, that Quran can be criticized. It is not above criticism. And the more you criticize anything, the more important it becomes.
Yes.
So I want this to answer to these two questions.
Yes, your second question is very easy to answer, because there's not only 1 or 2 volumes where he talks about for example, in volume 25 he talks about it, but I think there are also, I've seen it in other volumes. For those of us who have read Gandhi very carefully, there is a concept which is used by Gandhi, only Gandhi, and that concept is the acid test of reason. Dipankar, you have seen it also. Acid test of reason. He says, I apply always the acid test of reason when I'm approaching a problem or a prejudice or something. Okay? Now, he applies the acid test of reason against Hinduism, but also for Islam. And that's why he says, what's the matter of being critical towards the Quran? The Quran and the Muslims should be very happy that we're criticizing, as I quoted him, because criticism actually makes us larger, it makes us more powerful. And he's right, because we become more intelligent when we have this critical mindedness, Again, if we are dogmatic, fanatic, narrow-minded, like many tyrants, actually we destroy ourselves, like tyrants destroy themselves because they are narrow-minded. So that, I think this is very, very important in Gandhi.
The first question, sir, about Jinnah and Gandhi.
Jinnah, actually, again, for anybody who goes and reads Gandhi, from the very beginning, that Jinnah realizes, I think it's even 1919 or 1920 from, I think from what I've read, he actually writes to Gandhi and he says, I don't like your approach and your presence here in our movements. Yeah, because you're destroying us. He
considered more liberal Muslim, and he didn't
I've been to Pakistan. And as a Muslim, I'm born Shiite. I don't practice Islam. I don't practice any religion. I practice philosophy. And as I've been to Pakistan, I was invited there in Karachi to give lectures at the Ismaili Institute. And when I went to see this Qaid Azam's mausoleum, I was asking myself, this guy, because I come from the Islamic Republic of Iran, so I have it, and I've been to prison there, so I have a good experience of what does it mean to be an Islamist. And I looked at the 4 pictures of Jinnah, and the car which is there, and the plates, and with golden plates, let's say, and I said, this guy, he wanted to create, and he says he is the Qaid Azam of a Muslim country. I mean, he's a typical secular-minded person. He's not even a spiritual person. Okay? So I think that, like in the Islamic regime of Iran, you have a political foundation based on a lie. Based on a lie. And that's why Gandhi tells Abdul Ghaffar Khan, make Pakistan Pak. Because Pakistan is not pure from the very beginning, and he knows that. And I underline that as a Muslim. I don't think Pakistan was pure from the very beginning because of people like Jinnah and his sister and many others. The purity of Islam was in Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Maulana Azad, especially in Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a simple man who really is a believer and who really is devoting himself to civil society.
During your talk, I was reminded of Walt Whitman's idea that he says in The Leaves of Grass, I contain multitudes.
Yes.
So can one think of Gandhi in a similar light as a man of
course.
paradoxes, especially in the context of perhaps the relationship with Islam as you've been charting for us? I was reminded of the conception of mythopoesis, that especially when he conceives of the Hindu-Muslim unity question, it's often posed in such a way that it almost has a kind of poetic, transcendent dimension to it. The idea, for example, in Hind Swaraj, Hindu or Muslim dono mein samas hona chahiye, which is a term from grammar and from poetics. So you have that conception which he sort of takes to that kind of transcendental level. But there's also, as you say, the critical engagement, critical rationality dimension. So is there that interesting tension between these two? That was one. And secondly, how does he deal with the rising tendency towards militias, whether it's the Khaksars or whether it's the Muslim League National Guard later in the 40s, as he deals perhaps with a similar phenomenon within the Hindu context, but how does he deal with that?
Any form of violence, of course, is very critical towards it, I mean, all the debates that he has in the first period with the Khilafatis is that you don't touch cow and you don't touch violence. He's very, very insisting on that with Shaukat Ali, Muhammad Ali, all of them. And that's very, very important. As for his readings of Gandhi, I think that it inspires me. This multidimensional aspect of Gandhi is very interesting. Dipankar, who's a very good friend of mine, if you read one of his last books, between the 2 last books which he has published in the past, and at the book we did together also, of conversation, he refers to the idea of democracy and citizenship that Indians learned from people like Gandhi, how they actually insisted on that, how you have this duty of citizenship, how you have to have this consciousness of citizenship, how you have to believe how you're fighting for democracy. I think this is very closely related to this pluri-dimensional of Gandhi, that he wants to bring everybody because he thinks these are citizens of India and they have to make a democracy together. Indian democracy is made by all of them. It cannot be a Hindu Raj. A Hindu Raj is not a democracy, actually. Okay? It's very relevant with the elections.
This is a question I've been willing to ask you for quite a while now. Whenever I have discussions with my colleagues on Gandhi, I realize something that hinders their understanding of Gandhi is the current distortion of Gandhi and his ideas. So how, in these times of distortion of history as a whole, you engage the younger generation, because they are the ones who should actually realize the importance and significance of Gandhi and his ideas?
This is a very good question. Actually, I tried to answer it in the recent article I wrote in the Hindu. If Gandhi were alive and among us, what he would have said, would he have voted in the elections? No, he would have boycotted the elections, because he is a man of civil society. It doesn't mean that liberal elections are wrong. I think for many countries we are expecting to have liberal elections. But there is more to democracy than just choosing between Congress and BJP. And there is more to Indian democracy than that. So I think it goes back, your question goes back again to the question of education that you talked about. How younger generations who are readers of Gandhi, they have to educate themselves. Not only educate by us, but educate themselves. And I think there are two sides to it. One is theoretical and the other one is practical. I mean, the role that you can play, and this is the role that you are playing right now with Students for Peace, that I initiated. The role that you play, you do it pragmatically, practically. You have to consider, and I go back to what Dipankar said, solemnly and so interestingly, you have to consider yourself as a citizen. This Republican virtue that Renaissance people talk about, Americans in the American Revolution talk about, some French revolutionists talk about, 19th century. I love that. Republican virtue is so important. Republican civic virtue. This is actually the essence of democracy, not only party politics. You know, actually party politics takes its distance from this Republican civic virtue.
It's a wrong aggregation.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I just wanted to ask you about, Gandhi had this intense awareness that unity in India was very important for the freedom struggle. And in the world that we live in today, where there's such a divide between Islam and almost all other religions, and you being Muslim, from your reading, do you find some sort of tools or something that can help us to break this divide between the Islam world and the rest, almost the rest of the world now? And the second question I had was, it seems to me that Gandhi very much misread Jinnah, because he always believed, and I think he says that in an interview with Louis Fisher in 1942, where he says that, this idea that Jinnah has of a separate country, Pakistan, will never materialize, because as soon as the British leave, he will not have anyone to negotiate with, and we'll be one India. So I think there was a misreading, and I wonder if you can comment on that, because I think someone else has also remarked on why did he misread Jinnah so much? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So these are great questions, actually. Well, I think first of all, divide between Islam and others, Muslim and others, which comes a lot from the stereotypes which are used by Islamic countries, but also by Western countries, actually. So the first act, which is to fight the stereotypes. The second, I've been in dialogue with many Europeans and Americans for the past 20 years of my life, in many conferences, in many edited volumes, and many trips that I made and talked with people, and trying to understand how we can go beyond this prejudice and stereotype. And one of the themes that I always forwarded to them was that there can be Muslim Gandhis, because in their mind, Gandhi, and maybe in the minds of some of the people in this room, Gandhi is on the one hand, I would say, of the horizon, and Islam on the other. And in the two might never meet, I would say. But that's not true, because most of the people, they don't know who's, for example, Abdul Ghaffar Khan. And when you start talking about Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and there's a Canadian woman who has made a movie, a documentary, which is rarely shown around the world, they realize, oh my God, who's this guy? Is this a Muslim? We thought that all the Muslims are like Sayyid Qutb and Al-Banna and the Muslim Brotherhood and Khomeini and others. No, why? Islam is like any other religion. Islam has been actually at the origin of so many cultural and artistic and many things, heritage, a human heritage, is so important. So I think that this we at this level, people like me coming from a country like Iran, where the young people because of the Islamic 40 years of Islamic regime, they want to destroy Islam. If tomorrow the majority of Iranian young people, you ask them, would you like to remain Muslim or become Zoroastrian? They say, we want to become Zoroastrian. We want to go to the ancient religion of Iran, which has no meaning. First of all, there is no conversion in Zoroastrian, as you know. And secondly, it's not by destroying mosques that you can rebuild Hinduism or Zoroastrianism or anything else. So that's that. I think that we need to work more on this intercultural dialogue and interfaith dialogue. Secondly, your question is quite difficult to talk about. I don't know if the word misreading is correct or not. A kind of a controversy, yes. I don't think that Gandhi necessarily has a misreading of Jinnah. He actually doesn't. I think there is a point that Gandhi does not understand why Jinnah wants to make an Islamic country out of India. Why? Because from what I told you with all the quotes, Muslims are there. Same fight, same country, same people. We are not different. Why do you want to make another country? I mean, what is this element? And it's not necessarily a civilizational element. Because Gandhi of Hindu Swaraj, which has such a civilizational approach, he includes Islam in that civilizational approach. It's not only about Sikhism or Hinduism, it's also about Islam. India's Islam. When he talks about the heritage of India, it's also Mughal Islam, of course. So why should we take Lahore, for example, out of the equation and put Lahore on the other side of the border? Okay, so every Indian Punjabi looks at it with nostalgia and say, oh, you say Lahore was part of us and it's no more, so we have to go make some pilgrimage there, cultural pilgrimage. I think that's the problem. It's the way that he thinks that Jinnah is approaching the question, which is a question, is a political question which can be solved politically without partition, I think.
Sir, that Jinnah's thought of creating a separate homeland for Muslims, it came later.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
A very liberal man.
But from the very beginning, Jinnah is against Gandhi because he sees Gandhi as an enemy. I mean, this is what the archives and the letters show us. This is what the archives and letters show us. I'm not inventing it. He is from the very beginning, unlike Nehru, unlike Patel, unlike Maulana Azad, he feels endangered by Gandhi. He says the things you say is not correct and it puts us in danger. We're losing this battle. You're the wrong general for this battle. Let me put it this way. You're the wrong general for this battle.
But he himself was a liberal person, liberal Muslim. Later he...
Quote unquote liberal.
Last question.
Thank you, Ramin.
We have to finish.
I was wondering to what extent you agree with the critique that Gandhi certainly democratized politics, but that he mixed religion and politics. Thank you.
He certainly democratized, yes, politics. Did he mix religion and politics? No, he mixed spirituality and politics. And he talks about spiritualization of politics. He doesn't talk about politicization of religion.
But democracy is
now, yeah, democracy is spiritual, in the sense that it has a spirit and it gives there is a meaning behind it. But I've always insisted on the fact that it's very important, especially in the context of 20th and 21st centuries, since we have this element of politicization of religion. Politicization of religion, we start with liberation theology in South America, Pope Francis being one of them actually, Gutierrez and others, Romero, okay, revolutionaries. Then we have the Muslim political theology, we have the Shiite one, we have the Sunnite one. In this context, I think that, which is the context of politicization of religion, Gandhi never talks to politicize religion. He says, let's spiritualize politics. But spiritualizing politics is to bring ethics into politics. It's ethicalization of politics. So let's say how things are, and in that context we can understand well and can have a better interpretation of Gandhi.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, friends, we had a very interesting presentation and an equally interesting discussion. I am reminded of two quotes of Gandhi. He said, if somebody shows to me that the Vedas had justified untouchability, I'll reject the Vedas and not accept untouchability, even if it is sanctified by the Vedas. The second is, once he was asked a question, if all religions aspire to the same God, why should we have so many religions? He answered, all religions are true, but they are imperfect. Thereby suggested a more pluralistic and a kind of a democratic space for religions to learn from each other, because they are all imperfect. They are true, but they are imperfect. These are quotations from Gandhi. Thank you very much for being here. On the 17th May, although it will be hotter, and I don't know what would have happened to the country by that time. Maybe we are lamenting or we are rejoicing, you never know.
23rd May.
6 days. 6 days after.
Oh, achha, that's it. Yeah. But 17th May, before you reach that point, come and listen to Shiva Vishwanathan on Gandhi being reinvented. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much.